We've got 48% of our participants are all, are already thinking that a computerized assessment like we have here can add value to what they're doing in the early years classrooms. But we've got 44% who are on the fence. What advice would you give to them about the role that can play?
So I'd start by just giving a little bit of an example from ARC. So before we used BASE, we derived our assessments entirely from teacher assessments, and teacher assessments are, the most valuable way of understanding where children are every day formatively. But we know that all humans have unconscious biases, and we also know that in order to really understand that which a child can and cannot do, you have to have a really strong relationship, and that takes time to build. Of course it does. That's the same for adults as well. And so the way we used it at ARC was to do the Chem-BASE assessment in the first 2 or 3 weeks of the autumn term in reception, or once a child arrived in their first 2 or 3 weeks. And that was really informative, because actually when we looked at that data and we compared it with the teacher assessment data, what we found out was that the teacher assessment data from more experienced early years teachers taken 6 weeks into that first autumn term, so BASE in the first 2-3 weeks, then 6 to 7 weeks in that teacher assessment, that data correlated really well. It didn't correlate as well, actually, for teachers who were less experienced in the early years. Their teacher assessment often came down lower than the BASE assessment gave data from for individual children. But by Christmas, those assessments correlated. So the ones that didn't actually ended up correlating with BASE. The teacher assessment correlated with BASE by the Christmas teacher assessment submission. What that told me as the network lead for these schools was that you have to be highly skilled to really understand the extent of a child's knowledge, and you have to really create a very special learning environment very quickly. 6 weeks is actually not that long, but it's a very important time when you think of it as the first half term of a child's first year at school. And actually, what BASE was telling us was almost more accurate for some teachers than their teacher assessment baseline for those children where that relationship may not have been established or the environment wasn't quite right. And it helped us as EY leads, so from all of the schools, to reflect on what is our settling and supportive period like at ARC, and can we work together to work out a best practice for that, so that we can ensure that right from the start children are settling well and teachers are getting the information that they needed. And so for some of our schools, BASE is a really important part of that first half term, because it's giving data that they are able to jump on straight away. So another example would be that what we also found out was that children who were not within the standard deviation, so were lower than they typically should be, that if we started interventions with those children right away, because we knew that, they would make more progress over time than if we waited for teacher assessment data. So I think that for me is why it is so powerful to have this tandem of computerized assessment that is sharp and quick and insightful at the very beginning and the very end, alongside deep, meaningful teacher assessment. I will always say that then it's up for the teacher to really understand that assessment to move the children forward, and that a lot of how you do that comes from your teacher assessment using strong teacher assessment tools. But that combination was really insightful and powerful for helping children to make accelerated progress in their first year at school.